So tonight we got Jeremy on. I hope you're here. Yes, you are here.
Yeah, I am here.
I thought maybe Katrina might be here too. But
Hey, shalom.
where are you?
I'm
Oh,
right
So
here.
shalom.
there you is, right in front of my face. So if there's any other business, please bring it up right now. Let's get to it so we can get into the presentation.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Thank
Anybody?
you, Jack.
Okay, take it
Yeah,
away.
I'm just going to start off here with the presentation, and Jeremy's going to follow. Um, I would like to thank you personally, Jackson, for hosting this expo, and everyone here for taking the time to consider this presentation on the calendar preserved by the Zadok priests. I pray that we all remain teachable and humble to the Ruach, and that no confusion or falsity prospers in this community. It's unfortunate that those coming to the truth about the calendar are so divided and are kind of going in all different directions, leaning on their own understanding. So, um, wait, I'm so sorry. So, we have to think about this. Um, are we any better than the Christians with their 42,000 denominations? Um, there's like so many denominations already in Zadok that we see. We need to do better by reasoning through what Yahuwah has preserved for us. We must break the chains of Mitzrayim and worship Yahuwah his way instead of what we've been indoctrinated to believe. Zadok was a community devoted to preserving unity in Yahuwah's truth. They upheld the act of division from falsehood, naming the usurpers sons of darkness and boundary shifters. The war scroll talks about two opposing forces, the spirit of light and truth, and the spirit of darkness and injustice. These two opposing forces will be at play until the end of time, when Yahuwah will personally destroy all evil and those who align themselves with it. Our group has listened to all the presentations thus far, and there's much we can agree on. Number one, Zadok holds the authority on the calendar, as per Ezekiel 44. Jackson Snyder and Eddie Chumney does a phenomenal job with the history of what happened to the Zadok priesthood, proving it all out through scripture and historical fact. We could also agree that Enoch and Jubilees are scriptures, and they give us specific details on the calendar. Another thing we could agree on is that Kadash, or some say Kodesh, means the beginning of a month or a renewal, and not new moon. In fact, there's no such thing as new moon in scripture. Really, there isn't any person even citing a moon for the way that people do it these days for months, right? We could also agree that Messiah ate the Passover, dying on unleavened bread, proving that he was on the calendar that the Zadok priest preserved. And Jeremy has an incredible article on this. I highly recommend digging in to that. So the sun sign of the straight line shadow method holds the key to start the year. Everybody sees that. We also could agree that the day starts at light and not in darkness. Finally, getting out of Babylon is not a suggestion, it's a command. So after coming together as a group devoted to understanding what Enoch and the Zadok priests preserved, we would respectfully but firmly disagree on a few points. And this is kind of coming from all of the presentations that we have heard thus far in the Expo. Number one, we would disagree on moving the sun sign to a Wednesday of a Gregorian week to hold a Saturday Sabbath. Truthfully, when you think about it, this won't work if you're stuck on a deserted island. You won't know when Wednesday is to be able to recalibrate. That's why it's important to understand the sun signs, and they dictate the year. So that sun sign, that straight line shadow, tells us the fourth day of creation week. And creation week is very important to understand. So the words Wednesday and Saturday are not found in the scripture. And when you wait until probably next week, Ellie will prove that Saturday was actually the first day of the week during the time of Messiah. She will prove this out in detail. So hold on for next week because it's pretty profound. So number two, the theory of intercalating a week every so many years, we would disagree on, because this is only adjusting to the error of moving the Tekufa and will not make 364 days only in the calendar. There is nothing in scripture that alludes to this allowance of a week calibration. This is the same exact problem as the lunar Sabbath with intercalating a 13th month. You're just doing it a week because you're missing the sun signs. And you're moving it to put Yahweh's calendar on a Babylon calendar or Gregorian calendar. We can't do that. We must come out of Mitzrayim, this Egypt. Okay? We also found that using authors' added commentaries in the Dead Sea Scrolls with the moon insertions will not work, especially when you pick a year like Robert and Gina do, 2019. And then they say that it will line up 294 years before and after, and just keep continuing in that cycle. However, we have done the work to prove that it will not line up. So, and if anyone's interested, please come to us. We will give you all the evidence on that. So Chronicles is the first time the priestly cycles are mentioned, long after Enoch, Noah, and Moses. We have found that using the priestly cycles with the moon is full of inadequate data, pure speculation, and is really not in the scrolls at all. So we need to understand the consecration of the priests. That's where it's all at. And this will be probably, this will probably make it in this presentation tonight. So yeah. Wait, I'm sorry, I lost my place here. I want to stay on track. Okay, so we need to understand the consecration of the priest, the sanctification of the tabernacle, and the purification of the altar to keep the priestly cycle intact. This is where we will prove the divider day, the day zero, is absolutely critical in the reckoning of the year. Okay, So I want to say that the moon is definitely a witness, though. I'm not neglecting the moon. It's used for agricultural cycles, which we could prove as well. And it can be a witness to the sun, because when it's full, it's like polar opposite to the sun in its cycle. So we will go over that later. So number 4 that we would disagree with, starting the day after the straight line shadow, aka people want to call the equinox, but it is the Tekufa. So starting the day after the Tekufa will disrupt creation week. So there are many different cycles, well, 2 different cycles that Jeremy will go over tonight that will prove the creation week, and he will prove the starting of the months and how it all just goes perfectly together. So number 5, finally, the theory that we don't need the calendar after we finish the feasts. So Enoch and Jubilees both say the calendar is 364 days. And the reset is actually critical to understand the 2 cycles, keeping creation week intact, to hold the 4th day when the luminaries were created. Okay, so please be patient and get comfortable, because we have a ton of historical and scriptural evidence to prove out Yahweh's perfect, unchanging 364-day calendar. We do ask for all questions to be saved until the end.
I just have one before you go, and that has to do with something you just said.
Sure.
Can we extend this over to another day? Because you're not going to get all that in and out.
Yes, I would appreciate another day, because we, even just this morning, Yahweh gave us such a revelation, and it really blows the priestly cycle stuff out of the water, and it really proves the divider day.
Good.
So I would really ask for a second session to be granted. Yeah,
Would you want to do that tomorrow or wait till next week?
we could do it tomorrow too, if
Okay.
Ellie.
Yeah.
How's that
Yeah.
sound?
Yeah. So
That's great.
Okay, tomorrow
yeah, that'd
I'll
be
get
great.
another note out to whoever didn't come. Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, thank you for hosting. I think this is
Yeah,
fabulous.
yeah. We appreciate it.
It's just another way for us to all come together, because we're having a hard time communicating with the people that made the presentations previously, and to be able to right the wrong now is really, it's either going to unify us or it's going to divide us again. But I think the facts will prove themselves out pretty well. So Yahuwah really wants this truth out.
Yeah, and we're all coming together here. And yes, we thank you, Brother Jackson, for the opportunity to present this. And thank you for that introduction. And she was going basically over our entire presentation. So yeah, we were expecting not to get it all in tonight. But let me jump right into it so we can not waste any time here. So starting right here, Genesis 1 through 5. So verses 1 through 2 is going to be the beginning, creation, which is going to be before the counting of days. So we see, in the beginning, Elohim created the Shamayim and the earth. And hold on, let me get this out of the way so I can see. Apologies. So in the beginning, Elohim created the Shamayim and the earth came to be formless and empty, and darkness was on the face of the waters, deep, and the Ruach of Elohim was moving on the face of the waters. So right here, we're going to see, like I said here, before the counting of days. So the light is going to start the counting of the days. So, and Elohim said, let light come to be, and light came to be. And Elohim saw the light, that it was good. And Elohim separated the light from the darkness. And Elohim called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there came to be evening, and there came to be morning, day one. So here what we can see on day one was there was a formless void of darkness that existed for an unknown amount of time, the beginning. So the light coming to be is what begins the counting of days or time, like flipping a light switch. So without the understanding of Genesis 1:3, which is not the sun, and the light of Genesis 1:14, which is the sun, there is no chance of understanding the calendar of Yahuwah. So taking this into account, we can see there is a division of time before time started, or a divider that is seen at the beginning of creation week. So since creation week is the standard to start each year, we must take this void of time into account as well. This is the divider day that separates the years. So Yahuwah works in divisions. He divides the light from the darkness. He divides the days. He divides the weeks, the months, and seasons. So why wouldn't there be a yearly divider as well? So this divider day keeps the calendar in sync with the heavenly markers each year, without drifting behind them or ahead, then adding 7 days to the year to catch back up. So Yahuwah didn't give us the heavenly signs and then tell us to wait until a Wednesday, or to let the signs drift forward or backwards each year to catch back up to them. Nor did the Gregorian week as we know it today exist when Yahuwah created everything in the beginning. So why would the sons of Zadok align creation week to a Wednesday that didn't even exist at their time? So for a visual of what we just read above, so this is again Genesis 1:1-5. So 1 through 2 is going to be describing this void of time before the counting of days. And then we see the light begins the counting of days. We have the evening and the morning. So this is going to be our biblical day we see in scriptures. So here in Jubilees 2, verse 9, and Elohim appointed the sun to be a great sign on the earth for days, Sabbaths, for months, for festivals, for years, for Sabbaths of years, for jubilees, and all seasons of the years. So the sun is the great sign for these things. So we can also see there's going to be a sign for when the weekly Sabbath day will begin. So same book and chapter there, Jubilees 2, verse 18. And the angels of all the face, and the angels, all the angels that cry, holy to us, these two great kinds. He, Yahuwah, said that we should observe the Sabbath with him in heaven and on earth. So same chapter again, verse 21. And so he created therein a sign in accordance with which they should guard the Sabbath with us on the seventh day, to eat, to drink, Baruch him who has created all matters, as he has Baruch, and set apart unto himself a treasured possession, and a people above all peoples, that they should guard the Sabbath together with us. So in verse 21 of Jubilees 2, we see he created a sign in which day we should guard the Sabbath. Verse 9 is showing us that it's the sun. So the sun is the marker, the straight line Tekufa equinox, which is marking day 4 of the week. This is when the spring equinox happens every year. when the sun, moon, and stars were created to track the counting of months. So day 1 of month 1, on day 4 of creation week, 3 days later is always the Sabbath day. Why would there be a sign the angel of Yahuwah is mentioning in Jubilees if the Sabbath was always a never-ending cycle of 7 days? We also cannot have a sun sign happen day 3 before the sun was made on day 4. So here's a visual of what we are describing here. So this is the true menorah method. So we see the 4th branch, the longest, straightest branch. It's going to be marking day 4 of the week. Why is it the longest, straightest branch? Because back then, they would catch the sun rising due east, making the straight line sunbeam, shining right between the 2 pillars through the doorway in the temple and the tabernacle, lighting up the Holy of Holies. The priest would know this sign as soon as the sun is rising. So there was no need to track a straight line shadow all day for them. They would know that morning it's day 4. So 4th branch, longest, straightest branch, 1, 2, 3 days later, always the Sabbath. So here, Jubilees chapter 50, verses 1 through 4. And after this law, I made known to you the days of the Sabbath in the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai. And I told you of the Sabbaths of the land on Mount Sinai. And I told you of the Jubilee years in the Sabbaths of years. But the year thereof I have not told you until you enter the land which you are to possess. And the land shall keep its Sabbaths while they dwell upon it, and they shall know the Jubilee year. So, therefore, I have ordained for you the yearly Sabbaths, meaning the yearly Sabbath is divided, and the years and the Jubilees. There are 49 Jubilees from the days of Adam until this day, and 1 week and 2 years, and there are still 40 years to come for learning the commands of Yahuwah, until they pass over into the land of Canaan, crossing the Jordan to the west. So we can also see the sun's analemma from vernal equinox to vernal equinox is going to show us 365 days in between them. Job is going to allude to this divider day as his day of birth, which is Job 3, verse 6. So that night, let darkness seize it. Let it not be included among the days of the year. Let it not come into the number of the months. Also in Genesis 5:23 through 24, we're going to see all the days of Enoch. He walked the earth. It was 365 years. So there's no coincidences. So we can see Enoch walk the earth 365 years. The divider day would be day 365, although it is not counted in the numbering of days, months, or years, as Job himself alluded to. Also, Jubilees tells us the yearly 364-day count begins at creation and is numbered in 52 weeks of 7 days. So Jubilees chapter 1, verses 27 and 29. So verse 27, and he said to the messenger of the presence, write for Moshe, from the beginning of creation until my mikdash has been built among them forever, my tabernacle. And then verse 29, and the messenger of the presence who went before the camp of Israel took the tablets of the divisions of the years. So there's a division of years from the time of creation of the law and of the witness of the Sabbaths of the Jubilees according to the individual years. So again, we see the Sabbaths are going to be according to the individual years, according to all the number of the Jubilees from the day of creation, day 1, week of creation, when the Shamayim in the earth shall be renewed, and all their creation according to the powers of the Shamayim, or the heavens, and according to all the creation of the earth, until the tabernacle of Yahuwah shall be made in Jerusalem on Mount Zion, and all the lights be renewed for healing, for peace, and a blessing for all the chosen of Israel. And so it shall be from that day, the day of creation, and to all the days of the earth. So Jubilees 6, 30 through 33. And all the days of the command shall be 52 weeks of days, and these shall make the entire year complete. So we see 52 weeks of 7 days here, beginning from creation. Thus it is engraved and ordained on the tablets of the Shamayim, the heavens. And there is no neglecting this command for a single year or from year to year. So not once do we see adding 7 days to this count. We don't see a 53 weeks of 7 days in here at all. This is the command every single year. And you shall command the children of Israel that they observe the years according to this reckoning, 364 days. And these shall constitute a complete year. And they shall not disturb its time from its days and from its festivals, for all shall fall out in them according to their witness. And they shall not leave out any day or disturb any festivals. But if they neglect and do not observe them according to his command, then they shall disturb all their seasons, and the years shall be dislodged from this order, and they shall neglect their laws. So here, Lamentations 2, verse 6. He has demolished his booth like a garden. He has destroyed his place of meeting. Yahuwah has made the appointed times and the Sabbaths to be forgotten in Zion, and despises sovereigns and priests in his raging displeasure. So this is showing the Sabbath day was lost. Clearly shows the Sabbath day was lost. So how can this be if it was a constant 7-day endless cycle from year to year? Why would there need to be a sign each year that we read in Jubilees to know exactly when the 7th-day Sabbath was if there wasn't a yearly division of the weekly cycle? So a very interesting find that we have discovered here, and it's the Dead Sea Scroll 4Q324D. So it's going to be the location in the text of the word vacate, and it's going to be specifically in column 5, verses 9 through 10. So this word sometimes applies to a large amount of missing text from the scroll. So 4Q324D, this is column 5, verses 9 through 10. I also included column 6, verse 1 to complete it off. So we see on the 28th in a Sabbath, speaking of the 12th month, and then on, we have the missing text. And then after the missing text, it continues on. Weekday 2 in it falls the 30th day of the month. And then weekday 3 is additional. So this is talking about that 31st day of the 12th month, that seasonal intercalated day. So this is important to notice because only important and special days are recorded in this scroll. So normally there would be no text that would exist in this location unless it's an important date, and it is. This is the exact location the yearly divider day falls on after the last Sabbath of the year, which is going to be the 28th day of the 12th month. That's the last Sabbath of the year. What other large amount of text would be missing if it was just a normal day? So another interesting find is going to be 4Q394, also known as 4QMMT. We're going to find this. So this is from Florentino Garcia Martinez. So a Sabbath in it, again, speaking about that 12th month. Then after the Sabbath is added, and the year is complete in 364 days, and the rest of it is blank. So again, this is from Florentino Garcia Martinez edition. So this fragment is going to show some of what is missing there in 4Q324D, where the word vacate is located. Again, in column 5, verses 9 through 10. So Florentino Garcia Martinez version shows what is on the original fragments with no added text. So when we put these two fragments together, 4Q324D, 4Q394, this is our interpretation of what we will get. So on the 28th in it, the Sabbath day. After the Sabbath, a day is added, and the year is complete in 364 days. Then weekday 2 in it falls the 30th day of the month. Weekday 3 is additional. So just to show you, I took a screenshot of the PDF 4Q324D, column 5. So we're going to see the beginning of the 12th month there, line 7. So line 9 and 10 is what we're going to look at, but specifically 10, where we see vacate right here. And then it continues on. Column 6 comes around and it completes the sentence there. So below is going to be 4Q394 from Florentino Garcia Martinez version. So again, we see a Sabbath in it. After the Sabbath, blank is added. So, oops, sorry. So when we look here, so this is a screenshot I took of Florentino Garcia Martinez book. So, sorry, I went too far down there. Sorry, it's a bit finicky. My apologies. So specifically these brackets. So this one right here, if you can see where my cursor is, and this one right here is an author's insertion of what they think would make sense to complete the text. So if we remove that, take it back to the original scroll, we're not going to see any of this added. And Giza Vermees' copy has changed a lot of wording, but we'll go into that as well. That will probably be for next week, actually. So anyways, the brackets are meaning they're the author's insertion, and they're trying to do the best they can to try and make it make sense for what they know. So moving on, we're going to go into 4Q320. And again, this is going to be from Florentino Garcia Martinez. This is a screenshot I took of it. So we're going to see, to display itself from the east and shine in the center of the sky at the base of the vault from evening to morning. So on the 4th day of Shabbat. So they called their weeks Shabbats, which is going to also validify what Mary is talking about when she went to the tomb on the 1st day of the week. And it says the first Shabbat on the 1st day of the week. This is why, because they called the weeks Shabbats. So anyway, continuing on, the sons of Gamul in the 1st month of the 1st year, and then we get blank, missing text, vacate. And then the 5th day of the week of Jedediah corresponds to, it continues on there. So what we're going to see is there are no moon phases in there in the original text. So again, 4Q320, to display itself from the east and shine in the center of the sky at the base of the vault from evening to morning on the 4th day of the week, the sons of Gamul, in the 1st month of the 1st year. So what rises in the east and shines in the center of the sky in spring? Jubilees tells us it's these stars. So Jubilees 12, verse 16. So in the 6th week, in the 5th year, speaking of the Jubilees, Abraham sat up throughout the night on the head of the 7th month. So it will say new moon there in some translations. We know this word is actually HaChodesh, which is going to mean head of the month. So he sat up throughout the night on the head, HaChodesh, of the 7th month to observe the stars from evening to the morning. Same wording right there. In order to see what would be the character of the year with regard to the rains, and he was alone as he sat and observed. So what Abraham was doing right here, he was confirming the stars from evening to morning, because 10 days out of each month, the moon is actually going to be there during the day. So it's not always going to be there from evening to morning. That's why it cannot be talking about the moon there. Not to mention, we'll get into that more later, but let me continue on. So this method right here can also be found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So it's astrological physiognomies, or it's also called the Zodiac Scroll, but 4Q 186. And that's going to be, where they're looking at the stars to determine, the reigns of the year, basically. Also, we're going to see Yarak is not found once in the Dead Sea Scrolls, calendrical scrolls. So 4Q324D, column 1, the beginning of the first month on day 4, the Tekufa. So we see here, or as we see here, in 4Q324D, 4Q and the sundial in Qumran, the sign in the heavens is when the Tekufa occurs in the springtime, which is going to be the straight line method we all know. So again, I have 4Q324D, column 1, screenshotted here, just to show you. Beginning of the first month on weekday 4 Tekufa, and then on the 4th end at the Sabbath, and it continues on. So we can verify, yes, it's in brackets here, but we can verify it's speaking about day 4 Tekufa, because 3 of the 4 are not in brackets, and they are saying day 4 is marking Tekufa is marking day 4. So there are going to be many verses that are going to allude to day 4, and the equinox being the sign from Yahuwah to begin the counting of months. So Exodus 27:13, to the east side of the courtyard towards the sunrise. Exodus 38:13, and the east side towards the sunrise. Exodus 40:1-2. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, on the first day of the first month, you're to raise up the dwelling place of the tent of meeting. 2 Chronicles 29:3 and 17. In the first year of his reign, in the first month, he opened the doors of the house of Yahuwah and repaired them. And verse 17, and they began to set apart on the first day of the first month. And look, and on the 8th day of the month, they came to the porch of Yahuwah, and they set apart the house of Yahuwah in 8 days. So this is going to be important to remember during Marissa's presentation, because she's going to talk more about that. So 1 Samuel 25, and David said to Jonathan, see, tomorrow is the head of the month. Again, this is going to be mistranslated as new moon. It's again the word ha-chodesh, which is meaning the head of the months, the same word used in Jubilees. And I ought to sit with the sovereign to eat, but let me go, and I shall hide in the field until the 3rd day at evening. So from the head of the months, day 4, 1, 2, 3 days later, the Sabbath, then at evening, that Sabbath will end. This is only going to line up with the Zadok calendar. So Exodus 12, 1-2, and Yahuwah spoke to Moshe and Aaron in the land of Mitzrayim, or Egypt, saying, this month is the beginning of months for you. It is the first month of the year for you. Job 38, 4-5, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare if you have understanding. Who appointed its measurements, if you know, or who stretched the line upon it, the straight line? James 1, 16-17, do not go astray, my beloved brothers. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no change or turning shadow. So no turning shadow on the equinox, the Tekufa. So using a stick and marking the shadow throughout the day, the sun's shadow will cast a straight line during that day, and the shadow will curve or shift on other days and not be straight. And I'm sure most of us know that here. So the fourth command is going to be keep the Sabbath. Fourth day of creation, that's when the sun, moon, and stars were created. The fourth gate described in Enoch is Gadol Dalet in Hebrew, which is the fourth letter of the alphabet, which means the door or the passageway. Then we see the fourth menorah branch, the longest, straightest branch. 3 branches later is the seventh branch, the Shabbat. So the word Tekufa can be found in our Bibles today as well. It means the equinoxes and solstices, or the turning of the year and its seasons. So the Tekufa is a celestial event designed by Yahuwah as a sign for determining time, not a man-made Gregorian week. There are 4 Tekufas each year: the vernal and autumn equinoxes, the summer and winter solstices. The spring equinox determines day 4 of creation week, when the monthly cycle restarts for the year. So Tekufa is going to be Strong's Concordance H8622. We're going to see it means circuit, cycle, season, revolution. A revolution, a course, a lapse, a course of what? The sun circuit. So this is going to be a quote from the Jewish Encyclopedia. They're speaking about the 4 Tekufa. So I'm not going to pronounce the Babylonian names here. Just to summarize it real quick, we'll go through all 4. So the first Tekufa is going to be the vernal equinox. The second Tekufa is going to be summer solstice. The third, the autumn equinox. The fourth is going to be the winter solstice. And again, this is from the Jewish Encyclopedia itself, quoted from it. So Psalm 19, 1 through 6. So the heavens are proclaiming the esteem of El, and the firmament is declaring the work of his hand, which is creation week. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night reveals knowledge, showing day and night are separated, beginning in the morning. There is no speech, and there are words. Their voice is not heard, meaning the luminaries are silent witnesses. So again, we see their line, that straight line, has gone out through all the earth, because all across the earth on the Tekufa, you can track that straight line shadow. And their words to the end of the world. In them he put up a tent for the sun, and it is like a bridegroom coming out of his room, which would be the spring equinox marking day 4. It rejoices like a strong man to run the path, the 364-day path. It's rising from one end of the Shamayim, the heavens, and its circuit to the other end, the solstices and equinox, and nothing is hidden from its heat. So what we see is the sun, moon, and stars are speaking, but they have no voice because they're giving us visual signs, which are showing us the yearly markers and seasonal dividers. So this is the narrow gate. This is literally what we're going to see on the Tekufa, the sun rising directly east in the morning, the glory of Yahuwah shining into the center of the tabernacle/temple, lighting up the Holy of Holies directly in the center. The priest, like I said, would know this sign by sunrise that morning, which would mark day 4. So they would not have to do what we do today and track it all day long. But Ezekiel 43, 1 through 5 is going to describe this here. And he led me to the gate. So the gate facing east. The esteem of Elohim of Israel came from the way of the east. And his voice was like the sound of many waters, and the earth shone from his esteem. And it was like the appearance of the vision which I saw, like the vision which I saw when he came to destroy the city. And the visions were like the vision which I saw by the river Kibar. And I fell on my face, and the esteem of Yahuwah came into the house by way of the gate facing east. And the Ruach took me up, the Spirit took me up, and brought me into the inner courtyard, and see, the esteem of Yahuwah filled the house. So Ezekiel is a perfect explanation of the picture we just saw above of the Tekufa, the equinox, lighting up the Holy of Holies in the temple, which would be marking day 4 of creation week. So we're going to see here in Enoch 74:12, the sun and the stars bring in all the years exactly, so that they, what the sun and stars, they do not advance or delay their position by a single day unto everlasting. So they're not going to delay until everlasting, forever, but complete the years with perfect justice in 364 days. So we're going to see this backed up by Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 7, verse 17 through 19. It is he who gave me true knowledge of the forces of nature, what the world is made of, how the elements behave, how the calendar is determined by the movements of the sun, the changing seasons and the constellations, the stars, and the cycles of the years. So we're going to see in Enoch 74 here, the sun and the stars are bringing in the years. The moon is not mentioned in this verse at all. This is also supported by Wisdom of Solomon and many more that we're going to read here in just a sec. So the sun and stars are determining the calendar. So this is more evidence that the author's false insertion of moon phases in the Mishmarot are incorrect in bringing in the years, which we will go over as well. And the verses all around Enoch 74:12 all state that the moon will be off 10 days every year, and it only has 354 days in a year, proving that the translations that falsely insert moon here in Enoch 74:12 are in error. How can the moon bring in a 364-day year when it only has 354 days? So not to mention the plural they, that's kind of why I emphasized it. So they do not advance or delay the sun and stars is a big clue as well, as when moon is inserted falsely, it still says the plural they in that phrase for the singular word moon. So Enoch 82, 4 through 7. Blessed are all the righteous, blessed are all those who walk in the way of righteousness and do not sin as the sinners. In the reckoning of all their days in which the sun traverses the heavens, entering into and departing from the portals for 30 days, with the heads of the thousands of the order of the stars, the sun and stars, together with the 4 intercalated days, which divide the 4 portions of the year, which lead them and enter with them the 4 days. So owing to them, men shall be at fault and not reckon them to the whole reckoning of the year. Also, men shall be at fault and not recognize them accurately, for they belong to the reckoning of the year and are truly recorded forever. So again, we see more of that. These luminaries are recorded forever, and they're going to mark these things forever. So 1 in the first portal, 1 in the third, 1 in the fourth, 1 in the sixth. And the years completed in 364 days. And the account thereof is accurate of what? The sun and the stars. And the recorded reckoning thereof exact. For the lights and the months and the festivals and the years and the days. As Uriel has shown and revealed to me, to whom the Adon of the whole creation of the world has subjected to the host of the heavens. Also Enoch 75, 1 through 2, and the leaders of the heads of the thousands, which are the stars, who are placed over the whole creation and over all the stars, have also to do with the 4 intercalary days, being inseparable from their office, according to the reckoning of the year. So we just read these 4 divide the 4 seasons of the year. These render service on the 4 days which are not reckoned in the reckoning of the year. And owing to them men go astray therein. For these lights truly render service on the world stations, 1 in the first portal, 1 in the third of the heavens, 1 in the fourth, and 1 in the sixth portal. and the exactness of the year is accomplished through its separate 364 stations. So we see the separate 364 yearly cycle. So Job 9, verse 7 through 10. So who commands the sun and it does not rise? And he seals up the stars, stretching out the heavens by himself, and treading upon the waves of the sea. So who made Ash, which is Arcturus, or Kessel, which is Orion, and Kimna, which is Pleiades, and the rooms of the south? Who performs great and unsearchable deeds and innumerable wonders? Again in Job chapter 38, 31 through 33, do you bind the bands of Kimna, which is Pleiades, or loosen the cords of Kessel, the belt of Orion? Do you bring out the constellation, the stars, in their season? Or do you lead the bear, which is Ursa Major, with its sons? Do you know the laws of the heavens? Or do you apply their rule over the earth? So are we applying their rule that Yahuwah gave us to determine these things? So the calendar is determined by the movements of the sun and stars, as we can see all throughout scriptures. They determine the years and when to begin and end. We cannot trust Rome or the synagogue of Hasatan to have kept Yahuwah's true Sabbath day or calendar. In all of our studies, we have found through scripture, the Sabbath day is not always on a Saturday. In fact, you will not find the word Saturday in scriptures at all. The divider day every year is what separates the years and divides the numbering of the days, perfectly matching the markers and heavenly signs Yahuwah has given us to determine these things. Also, in addition, these verses in Ezekiel and Amos show the four heads of the 4 seasonal months are Sabbath days, just like the weekly Sabbath. No work or buying or selling. The days Noah ordained in Jubilees chapter 6 as a memorial. So therefore showing there is never more than 7 days between Sabbath days.
And here's a perfect place to wrap it up after the first hour. So wrap it up a little bit, if you would, please, Jeremy, and then we'll have a
Yeah,
question and answer period. Cool?
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Would we be able to fit Marissa's presentation? It's about 10 minutes or so. If
Yeah,
not, we'd be able.
but stop now, so I can say
Okay,
to those people upstairs, yes, did just like you said,
okay, no worries.
passing the buck.
We can continue with hers next week. It's pretty important, but
Maybe
I'll
right
finish
now.
this up here.
Yeah, okay.
Uh, so uh, these verses here in Ezekiel and in Amos are going to show us these heads of the months are going to be just like the Sabbath days. So, thus the Adon Yahuwah, thus said the Adon Yahuwah, the gate of the inner courtyard facing east is shut on the 6 days of work, but on the Sabbath it is opened, and on the head of the months, again, it's going to be mistranslated as new moon, but we see it's going to be Ha Chodesh. It is open, the heads of the months. Amos 8, 5 through 6, saying, when does the head of the months? Again, they mistranslate that into new moon,
Oh, yes.
but again, it's going to Ha Chodesh. So when does that pass? So we sell grain. And the Sabbath, so we can trade our wheat. So this is basically showing us these 4 seasonal heads of months, the 4 Noah ordained days. They're also going to be just like the Sabbath days, basically a high Sabbath. And yeah, I don't know if we have time for Marissa's presentation. It's only about 10 minutes,
Well, let's see
but
if there
if
are questions, because this
okay,
is a half hour, and if there aren't any to fill that, then sure.
yeah, no worries. And if not, we can just continue and start with Marissa's presentation next week as well.
Very erudite. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.
Now, are there questions, comments? Be kind.
I have a question.
Go for it.
Yeah.
So, are you saying that the Sabbath moves every year in this calendar?
No, the Sabbath doesn't move. It actually stays firm in the heavens, marked by the greater light, the sun, which dictates the year. The
Yeah, correct.
Gregorian calendar shifts because they don't acknowledge the change in the year, because there's 364 days in his calendar and a 365-day yearly cycle from vernal equinox to vernal equinox.
So, I'm celebrating,
Do you track the equinox, Robert?
well, I'm celebrating the Shabbat on the seventh day currently, which was yesterday. What day do you celebrate Shabbat?
Well,
So,
because the
sorry.
equinox came in on a Thursday this year, we use that straight line as the menorah method. And the 3 days after that would be on Sunday. So Sundays this year is the Shabbat.
Correct.
Holding to the sun sign.
So, the Sabbath moves on the scale of the 7 day week.
No,
Leave
No, no,
Gregorian,
no.
leave
no,
So,
Gregorian, Julian, leave all that stuff out of it. The Sabbath moves within the 7 day, because
no.
in Genesis 1, we are
We
given
just
the,
said that the Sabbath day stays
so
firm.
hold
Firm.
on. Let me respond real quick.
Okay.
Sorry.
well, with all due
So,
respect,
so
you just had an hour, and I'm trying to elaborate this question.
yeah, yeah. No, I'm trying to respond to the question. So, what we see there, Genesis 1, 1 through 2, we're starting the counting at 0 each year. And just like the verses in Jubilees, we pointed out, they're showing there's a division between the yearly Sabbaths because we start the counting at 0, like Yahuwah shows us right there in Genesis 1, 1 through 2. And
Okay.
actually, we're going to be getting into a lot more of that as we continue on. But basically, to answer your question, the Sabbaths aren't floating. The Sabbaths on the true Sabbath day, it's the Gregorian week that appears to float around because they don't understand the wheel within the wheel, which is why I was kind of hoping that Marissa would be able to show her presentation because she goes into detail about that. But no worries. We're basically seeing two cycles in the year, two 364-day cycles. So Jubilees is going to be describing to us the weekly cycle of 52 weeks of 7 days, which is going to be uh, our yearly 364-day count starting from creation. Then when we get into Enoch, we're going to see he's describing the solar cycles, which is going to be marking the monthly 364-day count for each year. So it's kind of hard to explain right now, which is why we were going to go into it next week. But what we're seeing is a wheel within the wheel, kind of like bricks in a wall, basically. So overlapping, the bricks are all the same size, but you overlap them. And why? Because it gives it strength. And it's basically the two witnesses that are bringing in the beginning of Yahuwah's year.
Right. And you can't have a fourth day sign without the creation week being held. So with Yah's calendar, he holds creation week by dividing the year from the first day to the last day. There is a division of that year, and it's day 0, Genesis 1 2, the void. And again, Marissa will be going over this in detail. Yahuwah actually gave us something incredible about the priestly courses this morning that's going to really help us understand the priestly cycle when it comes to the division of the year. It's absolutely beautiful.
Okay. So I was just maybe people didn't pick up on it, but you have a different Sabbath. Um, and whether you say it's not floating or it is floating, it's a Gregorian moving. I just wanted to make sure people picked up on that.
Well,
So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
the Sabbath,
how many days out of time or non-days do you have in your calendar?
there's only one day a year.
Yep,
So there's a 1 day not counted.
Yes.
Okay.
correct.
And it's
So,
just dividing, just like the seasonal divider days divide the years or divides the seasons, it's dividing the year. But
So what
again,
do they do with the commandment about the showbread? You know, the bread of the presence that is to be kept every 7 days. Where's
so we
the
were,
how
oh,
do
sorry.
we reconcile that count?
So we're going to get into that as well with Marissa's presentation. But basically, to answer that, there's a consecration of the priesthood that we found, and it requires on the eighth day, which is when everything's going to be consecrated, these things to happen. So the showbread on this divider day, it's a day not counted. So they wouldn't bake the showbread, anything on that. So when we start at zero, it's just, yes, we experience this day, we live this day because we have the sun, moon, and stars. Whereas in Genesis 1, the sun, moon, and stars weren't created yet. So, yes,
Where
we experience this day, but it's not counted.
where can I find that instruction that you just said we don't count this day upon the showbread counting?
So, that was as we read right there in 4Q394, where the day after that 28th day is added. Also, right there in Jubilees that we were reading from creation. Also in Genesis 1 1 through 2. So that void of time before the counting of days started. So Yahuwah is giving us creation week as our standard to start each year. So we can agree that our day begins at light, right?
Yep.
So we see the light is going to start the counting of the days. So before that, before the counting of days, it was a creation time period where time was not being counted yet. Then the light is what starts the counting of days. Then we get day 1, week of creation, all the way to day 7. Day 4 is going to be marked by the sign of the sun, which is going to be that Tekufa, which we showed is lighting up the Holy of the Holies right in the center of the tabernacle there.
Okay. So the moon doesn't do much in y'all's calendar from what I've gleaned and what I've watched from your other presentations on your channel, except y'all say it's for agricultural, like planting and whatnot.
Hey,
So,
Uh,
so
Robert, I feel like a lot of the questions that you have will be answered in the next part of the presentation. And I love that you're trying to understand all of the like the multifaceted parts of Yah's calendar. But you're like you're going a little quicker than our presentation is. I really appreciate the questions from you though. We're getting there.
Well, the moon was brought up in the very beginning by Katrina. So,
yeah,
with all
yeah.
due respect, let's take on First Enoch 74, verse 5. It says, "In 2 months," some versions read "in 2 gates." So, but for all intents and purposes, in 2 months, the moon sets with the sun in those two portals, or in the two middle portals, the third and the fourth. So, isn't that a sign from the moon for the year?
No, because actually the line where it follows up after that, where it says according to the sign of the year, that is not featured in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's not in the original text.
I
So,
wasn't reading the
Correct,
Dead Sea Scrolls
correct.
though. This is the book of First Enoch, 74, verse 5.
right. And
Yeah,
that
yeah.
line where it says according to the sign of the year in Enoch, that is not featured anywhere else. That was inserted.
Correct. Meaning in the book of Enoch from the Dead Sea Scrolls, you will not find according to the sign of the year where you were mentioning it. So We
I didn't say
so
that.
like I said, we do use the moon and it is a witness. It's just not a determining factor. So that's
Right.
kind of what Marissa's presentation was going to be about, what like how we use the moon as a witness. So we don't just dismiss the moon as useless. We actually see it's an important part of it. It's just not the determining factor for a year. It's going
Hang
to
on, I
be
don't think y'all heard what I read. I never said according to the year. So first Enoch 74:5 says in 2 months the moon sets with the sun in those two middle portals, the third and the fourth.
yeah. So that's
So
going to
this is
be
telling us that the moon is a sign for
yeah,
for the two middle portals.
yeah, and that's exactly what we were going. That's what we were speaking about just now.
And
So Robert,
the two
you
middle
followed
portals
up your question with, but isn't that a sign for the year? That
well,
was your question, so I answered that.
what is the fourth portal? Isn't that when that's when the new year is beginning, right?
So the
Yeah. So
moon
that
actually rises and sets with the sun every month when it's a new moon. It is traveling along the Shamaim with the sun on the new moon every lunar month.
Which is why this verse is talking about the full moon. Because
yeah. So
if the new moon, which I know it does, it rises and sets with the sun every month. So Enoch wouldn't have to tell us that because we already know that. Enoch is telling us that in 2 months, the moon is going to set with the sun in the two middle portals,
It
the third and the
does.
yeah,
fourth.
it does. It
It
does.
does. It absolutely does. During the month that the moon is in the third, sorry, during the month that the sun is traveling in the third gate and in the fourth gate, the full moon does rise and set with the sun. Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I have a question. I want to get this question in before we run out of time, and it kind of is turning into a debate rather than questions. So here's my question, and it kind of runs along with the gentleman Robert, his question about the Sabbath. For years, keeping the Sabbath, I always kept it on Saturday. Didn't know anything else. That's what everybody did. And the first time someone challenged me on that, they didn't really challenge me. They just said, hey, it's not always on Saturday. And I said, well, that's crazy. It's always Saturday. It always has been. Not realizing that we, even though Robert said, disregard all the calendars. Well, the reality is the world right now is living according to the Gregorian calendar. And the Saturday falls along on those lines, the Gregorian calendar. So we're kind of stuck in that as far as indoctrination. Now, when I really started searching this out a year ago, after those seeds were dropped in my brain, I couldn't really kick it, and I just couldn't make sense of it. But from what I understand, there's been a lot of calendars. Some were 8-day calendars, some were 10-day calendars, some Saturday meant the first day of the week. And so it does appear that if you keep a different day other than Saturday, that it's floating, but it makes sense that, of course, we know Yah's seventh day rest would not be floating. It's standard. How do we know for sure that it's not what we know today as a Gregorian Saturday? And I totally believe that the Gregorian calendar is probably an illusion. It was created by pagans. I think it was created for the purpose to deceive, get the Christian followers to go with a Sunday and the Sabbath followers to go with a Saturday, and where Yah's true seventh day might be obscured because everything in our world is a deception. So we have to question everything. So, how do we know for sure that the true Sabbath probably isn't going to line up with the current calendar, which is not Yah's calendar? I mean, we can ignore those calendars, but the reality is everybody is living according to the Gregorian calendar
Well,
in our day and time.
we're going to give absolute proof. We're going to give historical sources. Ellie, that's in Ellie's presentation for next week. She's going to give a phenomenal presentation on how the calendars have changed. And actually, Saturday was day one of the week.
Yeah, that's what I understand.
So it can't be this cyclical, and nobody has ever given me any kind of proof as to how you think that the 7-day cycle has continued since creation, especially because there's so many different calendars out there and we've tested them all. We have historical proof.
Yeah, that seems to be the current talking points. I mean, I
Right.
hear it all the time.
So
It's
how are we supposed to
day.
use the luminaries? We are supposed to use the luminaries to set the year, and thus the weeks, the Sabbaths, the months follow perfectly. And that is the key, is understanding that the luminaries have to dictate when because if you're stuck on a deserted island, Sarah, what are you going to use? Are you going, like, it's very easy to use, like, okay, there's the moon, right? That's in a cycle less than Yah's, but if you know the foundation of Yah's calendar, 364 days, you track it every day, or you track, you know what I mean? It has to line up. And you don't have a Wednesday to move it to on a deserted island. Yeah.
Oh, that's another thing I've noticed when I first started studying these calendars a year ago. And the reason I started in the first place, because I noticed all the Torah people were observing on different dates, and I thought, well, that's not right. There's got to be truth. And I quickly ruled out the lunar because it appeared that came out of Babylon. So I went to the solar, and then they started the year and the month on a Wednesday, which sounded good to me until I got it through my indoctrination that, wait a minute, that's according to the current calendar. So to only use a current calendar day called Wednesday as an anchor, that didn't make sense. Well, does that mean our Sabbath is off? And so I've been studying every which way. And one thing I'm becoming clear on is that we can't rely on the current calendar as any kind of anchor. And
No.
Because if we were stuck on a desert island without any calendars in front of us, we could only go on the luminary. So to move the days to fit that does not make sense. And to think that, the seventh day is an unbroken cycle, but yet all these calendars are they're either changing the anchor day or adding a week or adding a month to make it fit. So how is that not breaking the 7-day cycle? So the calendar that you're advocating, is it able to keep a 7-day cycle without breaking it? And I'm starting to really get what that zero, the 0 day, the start, because you have to, there has to be a reconciliation between the 364-day sacred calendar and the reality that we live in of the solar cycle of 365 days. So what do we do with that extra day? And it has to be biblically based. We can't come up with our own thinking on that.
Absolutely.
Man's reasoning will always be skewed. So I can't wait to hear the stars, because no one is addressing the stars. It says in Genesis, the stars is the part of the luminaries to bring in the months and the years, but no one addresses that in any calendar. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited for that portion. Jackson, I hope that you allow time for that. I've been waiting years for that one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mob rule. If you promise to beat me up afterwards, then maybe you could do that.
No, we just really appreciate you hosting this, but I am really excited because every time we learn something new, I think it's going to get us closer to the truth, and I'm convinced 100% that we can find the truth. And the lack of truth is keeping the body of believers divided. There can be no unity when nobody's in agreement.
That's true.
And you don't want to agree on false premises.
I didn't think there was any disagreement on this because I don't listen to anybody else. I just read the text. Okay. I don't look at YouTube stuff because I just get frustrated because there's always so many errors in it. So I read And
That's a lot of wisdom there.
yeah, and I think about Yeshua. Do you think that Yeshua kept the wrong day? I think the
Absolutely not.
Zadokites, yeah, let's find out what he kept. And that
Mhm.
be easily found even in the New Testament. So again, I have to say the last thing is last week is the mystery is often history, and the several courses, the sources that I have read on the subject have no idea about the calendar change from the Zadok calendar to the secular Greek lunisolar calendar. They don't know what happened then, but it's very important that they would because the Sabbath did change then. That's the only time that I can see when it did. In after 171 BC, after the death of Honias the third, and
Yochanan.
even with him, the fourth went over to Egypt, built himself a temple. The rest of the Zadokites went out. Honias went to Egypt. The rest of them went out to the east and built themselves a place. So why would we have lost it since then? Unless the popes, and we know at the beginning of the second century, the third century, that the Christians, so called, would do anything they could to separate themselves from Jews, including lie, steal, and kill. So that's what I think. I'm listening
Yeah, yeah.
carefully because I want to know if I missed something.
See, that's what I did, Jackson. And I know that you don't go and look into other people's stuff and kind of test, like maybe you don't go in and test things. I love to do that. That's how I learn. That's how the Ruach works. I watch a teaching and I literally go and test it and test it and test it. And as you know, my name is Katrina Tahar. I
Sure.
will, yeah,
Tahar.
I put comments in the chats and on your Facebook, hoping that they could be addressed. Because I love to test this stuff. I love to test out. And I think that's what led me to this calendar is because I do test it. I test everything. I I admit that I'm just flesh and I could be wrong. So I make sure that I do my due diligence with my brothers and sisters, knowing Zadok. I sat through Tina. I sat through Rojo. I sat through Robert. I sat through Dustin. And I diligently did the work and trying to understand what they were saying. However, there was many contradictions.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I
And
is
we should be doing that, but we should be
University
going back and
scholars.
forth and saying, hey, look, I'm noticing this here. Could we come together and try to talk this through instead of ignoring one another? You know, let's come together as a group and actually talk it out. When I found errors in Robert's calendar, I went to him and I said, please, Robert, can I please talk to you? We all did. Marissa went to him, Jeremy went to him, and we said there's many different errors in your calendar, and he refuses to talk. And I think that is what's dividing us, is the division of, we want to be right, and it's pride. And I think we need to get away from that, and we
Well,
need to come together.
Robert
Hang on,
said
I
he
gotta.
was going to stick this out this time. So,
They've been name dropping, so
mhm.
there is some backstory, there is some history. So don't act like I've dodged any of you. I have been open, but you guys have not been of the proper spirit. I've talked to many people. I've talked to Dustin over the phone a couple of times for an amount of 3 hours.
We asked for you
Uh,
to come
he
on the
he
phone with
come
us too.
he
You
comes with a
refused.
different he comes with a different spirit. So please, just with all due
So,
respect, don't name drop.
so hey, brother, I wasn't name dropping you, and I've always come to you with respect and wanting to talk this out. So that's what I had to say about that. So
Well, I'd like it, Robert, are you on here to refute this calendar or to ask questions and learn? I mean, this is not start sounding like a Q&A session, but more like a debate and
Well,
refute session.
that's helpful. That is helpful to me at
Mhm.
least, because I
Yeah, I
want to
mean,
see both
Okay.
sides here because I want to be right.
Yeah.
If I can't be
Yeah,
I mean,
right,
yeah,
I might as well
exactly.
go jump in.
Good
So,
point.
all I was
That's a good
doing was asking questions. When did asking questions turn into a debate? I asked about the showbread. I asked about Enoch 174. I mean, just
Well,
if you can't
all of
handle
Oh,
the
no,
heat,
those are
don't go to the
questions
kitchen.
no.
are great.
So
No
hold,
one's
hold
saying
on,
anything.
hold on.
Yeah.
We
So
I
did.
just want,
those are legitimate questions you asked,
okay.
brother, and
I,
we're doing our best to answer
okay.
them. And this is only half of our presentation because
Yeah.
the same questions you're asking we're actually going to cover
pop up.
in our next
Okay.
section. So we're doing our best to answer as much as we can with what we are understanding what you're saying as well. So
Yeah. That
With
makes
that,
sense. I
let's just
just hope the questions are in
let's
the
get
right
ourselves
spirit.
on common ground now. Time is up anyway, and let's leave it go until tomorrow, and we'll come back, and we'll all have a little bit different attitude, I think, at that time. We talked about
yeah,
this
yeah.
last week because we had the same problem the last 2 weeks in a row. So this has got to stop. We've got to have a unity of spirit. There's no way around it. But you can understand why I I manage groups and I'm no good at it because of this. Because people believe different ways and they just won't get along about it. So yes, we
Oh
want to
yeah.
be right, but it's got to be our rightness has to be secondary to our love and friendship. It just has to be. I know that sounds like the silly way to go, but that's the way it is. So,
I agree with that.
Oh,
I agree
I
with
definitely agree.
okay. Well, in that case, Yahweh be with you until we meet again. And that meeting again is tomorrow night. I ask you, if you would please, to put your first and last name, your real name, in the chat if you haven't done this before with an email address so I can find you again. I'm not going to sell you out any place or send you a subscription for vitamins. I just want to use it for my own purposes and it will benefit you. Also, I look at a lot of scholarly essays on this subject. That's where I get my information. And there's sometimes that I find some that have absolutely and have stuff that I've never seen anywhere before. Maybe you have, but I'd like to pass those along to you as well, which I'll start doing next week if you want them. Okay? All
Thank
right.
you.
Sounds
Question, is
good.
this tomorrow or
Thank
next
you.
week? Just for clarity.
Amen. Tomorrow at 8 o'clock
Brother,
Eastern.
brother, is this tomorrow evening or is this next week?
Tomorrow evening, 8 o'clock
Great.
Eastern. All right. See you then.